So yeah, I haven't done any work since I last did a video, but I want to do one anyway because I tried to start work and realised that I don't know what I'm doing next. And actually, it's quite useful to have a little thing where you talk about your longer term goal and then how it breaks down to short term goals. So I had done the unlocking objects thing. This is this bit. And my next job is to unlock traits. The way that objects unlock is... how do they unlock? I actually need to look, I really can't remember. So unlock object. That goes to... Oh, all the tabs are messed up. Refers to an object called oProgress. And it has an array for what item indexes should be unlocked. So let's look at that and... Oh, that's already what I was looking at. Where is that defined then? Must be initialized somewhere. Oh, it is initialized there. Oh, that's what initialized it. Okay, that's all the indexes. Right, okay. This is the problem with like when you can't work for 2 days, is when you come back to it, I can't remember what the fuck I did. I don't know what any of this stuff says. That goes through, makes an array and sets them all to false initially, and then it unlocks the default ones. And then when we load the stations in, eventually we're going to make it so that loading those stations in also unlocks any text that they have attached to them if you've captured that station or liberated it. So how does it know how big this array is? It's referring to a thing called global item count. Let's look for that. And that is in this script, which manually assigns all of those to the right object IDs. So this is a kind of trick I have to do to, in order to read in some data from a text file and turn that into object indexes that GameMaker understands. These are all numbers really secretly. And so at some point in the game I need to tell the game, okay, remember whatever number this is, just store it in this array. And then when I'm reading it from a text file, I can look through that array and say, okay, create the thing that's in there. And you know, in game, if I say, oh, this script wants to spawn an O grenade, look through the item indexes. If any of those are an O grenade, then check if it's unlocked. But this is not going to work for traits. Traits are things like, I think grenades uses the trait system. Add trait to item. So it can have a trait called proximity, a trait called impact, a trait called timed. And those are really just words in an array. So if I want to make an unlocking system for traits, how am I going to do it? It's going to be pretty similar. I'll need some kind of setup list of traits like this, but with traits instead of objects. They won't be indexes, they will be actual words, so they'll be strings. And then when this function that adds traits to an item, this one will have to be the one that checks, can I add this trait to an item? If it hasn't been unlocked, I shouldn't add it. That might get trickier if I change my mind. Right now the way I'm doing it is if something's locked off, it'll never appear in the galaxy at all in any circumstance. I have considered, and I'm tempted by the idea, that perhaps unlocking should be more about what's available in the shops. And so out there in the wilds, you can still find things that you can't buy. I like that idea. With the present loot tables and systems, that is too generous, because then unlocking would not be a big deal because you find so much stuff, like at least half the loot that you get is stuff you find. But that's just a balance issue, and I'll fix that later on. I think for now it's just simpler if I lock things off completely, and if I want to mod in later the ability to lock things off only in shops rather than in the loot tables, I can do that. I can't help thinking that the best, like gameplay-wise, the coolest thing would be if locked items, things you haven't unlocked, were never available in shops and very rare in the wild. And then after you unlock them, they become available in shops and common in the wild. That is just another level of complexity that I don't want to deal with right now, so I'm not going to do that. But that's my instinct, is that would be the best kind of balance system. So I'm going to change add trait to item so that it will check whether the trait's unlocked. In order to do that, I'll have to refer to some kind of list of whether traits are unlocked or not, and to do that, I will go into, I'll set it up here. It will be, I want to go through an array. I don't think it's going to be as simple as this, or if it is going to be as simple as this, the array will have to be created elsewhere. Like at some point I'm going to need an array just like this, where it says something like global traits equals timed. I'm going to get in trouble because these traits are, when you add them to an object, it's very clear from context that timed is referring to the detonation time of a grenade, or detonation method of a grenade. And from this list right here, I'm writing just global.traits. It's not at all clear that that refers to a grenade, is it? So I could do more specific trait names. They are unique to items, I think. I don't think there's any situation. I know there's a trait called rechargeable, which applies to multiple different item types. And it means the same thing in each context, pretty much. So they're not completely unique to item types, but they're mostly unique. Let me just check this is still recording, because I've been talking for a long time. Doesn't really matter, I don't need to record this especially. As you've noticed, this is not a quick plan and not a quick high-level talk through of what I might do. It's me actually thinking through the process. But it's useful to say it out loud sometimes. So does it look like this? I think it does. And if I later change the name of that trait, so here's the problem actually. I'm now writing out the name of the trait here, and I'm also writing it out in the grenade create event here, and that's bad practice. You don't want to be, all these strings have to be necessarily the same, like every mention of the word timed here has to necessarily match all the others. You don't really want to be writing it out in multiple places like this. It's okay here in the choose function, because I can see whether these are different and they're all in one place, but I don't like the idea that I'm defining that trait both in the progress startup function and also in the grenade startup function, and then all the other items that have traits would all be defining their own things. Is there a way? I mean, enumerators are a good way of doing this, but GameMaker technically supports them, but if I define one, it fucks up all of my code. Like literally, if I defined an enumerator with the word timed in it, everything that starts with the letters TIM would suddenly come up as a syntax error, and TIM would be highlighted as if they're a reserved word. Like, not the word timed, but just the first 3 characters of it. So don't even tell me to do enumerators. I can't. And that's really probably the only option that is any better than just writing out strings. I'm certainly not going to make them all numbers, because that's a fucking nightmare to read. So, really the question is, okay, so what it does is, I'm going to save, like a station would have assigned to it either an object index or a trait string. And then when we read that in, we'd check the trait string against the list of possible trait strings we know about and unlock it if it's there. Yeah, I don't think there's a way I can avoid just writing it out in 2 different places without enumerators, and I can't use enumerators. So that's probably... Oh, I can make them objects, that's what I could do. But that feels real messy. I can make them objects. Okay, so often something that comes up a lot when you're working with GameMaker and you're talking to people who don't use GameMaker is they say, oh, that thing could be an object. And you say, do you know that in GameMaker, or a class, and do you know that in GameMaker, you can't define a class beyond actually creating a game object. And when you create a game object, if you instantiate it, it actually runs code all the time and drains your performance. And so one of the methods of doing control configs I'd heard suggested was every control could be its own object. And there's 150 of them or something. And that's a lot of fucking objects. And all of them drain performance all the time if they're instantiated, which they need to be if you want to refer to their properties. So usually that's a bad idea. But my thinking here is that I don't need to ever spawn them. So let's say there was an maybe call it O trait proximity object. That would become a reserved word that I could refer to anywhere. If I spelled it wrong, I could see that I'd spell it wrong because it's in grey rather than in red. If I wrote O grenade here, you can see it goes red. So there'd be no danger of typos. It would basically be a unique number. This is like enumerators. It's a thing that displays in code as a word, but is really a number, and could be stored in various places without any risk of error. I think that makes sense. So all these lines would be things like, O trait quiet instead. I think that makes sense. I feel like the I don't know a lot of good programming practices. And so I have a voice in my head that like sounds like an experienced programmer, but actually doesn't have any experience. And so it's constantly telling me, oh, you should do it this way. Oh, you should encapsulate things. Oh, you shouldn't have these things refer to each other. And that voice is telling me that this is a good idea, that I shouldn't have all these strings all over the place. But I can never trust that voice too much because it, like I say, it doesn't actually have any experience. It's just aping people I've heard who have experience in a non-intelligent way. So maybe I'm going to do that. Maybe I'm going to change all the traits to be objects. Or maybe I'm not going to do that. Maybe first I'm going to try it with a string method, because even if that proves to be awkward or annoying, I can always substitute in objects later if it does prove to be annoying. There's no need to necessarily do it the sort of super rigorous way right off the bat, because that's going to involve changing, replacing, modifying a whole bunch of code that already works and is already in there. So maybe the first thing I do is I just treat them as strings, and I do define them in two different places, and that's it. And just to test it, just to get it working. And then later I might go back and do that object index thing. Okay, I think that's my first move, so I'm going to stop this here.